How's it going there, lovely people? Thanks for being here for the 2026 SRPR Lucia Getsi poetry reading, part of a nationwide National Poetry Month celebration. Poetry is the thing that I definitely need right now. I'm Steve Holly. I'm the editor of the poetry journal SRPR that sponsors this event, and also the director of the wonderful publications unit right here at Illinois State University. And it's my pleasure to welcome two esteemed and awesome poets, Vasvi Kejriwal and Aaron Coleman, to Bloomington Normal for an evening of poetry and community. Before I introduce our special guests, I want to begin with the land acknowledgement. Illinois State University was built on the land of multiple Native nations. These lands were the traditional birthright of Indigenous people who were forcibly removed and have faced centuries of struggle for survival and identity in the wake of dispossession and displacement. We would like to acknowledge that our campus sits on the lands that were once home to the Illini, Peoria, and the Miamia, and later, due to colonial encroachment and displacement, to the Fox, Potawatomi, Sauk, Shawnee, Winnebago, Eowe, Mascouten, Piankashaw, Wea, and Kickapoo nations. We also express honor to those Indigenous people who we may have excluded in this acknowledgement due to erasure and historical inaccuracy. I would also like to express my solidarity with the AFSCME facilities workers from ISU who are currently striking for fair wages. They do so much to make the university community thrive and deserve to be fairly compensated. And I wish the university would recognize these colleagues with the contract they most certainly deserve. And I've spent many a night late at the publications unit and gotten to chat with a lot of folks that are now striking for fair wages, and I see how hard they work and also, what an integral part of our community now. With that said, I'm thrilled to introduce our first reader of the evening, Vasvi Kejriwal. Vasvi is a writer from India. Her work meditates on grief, deconstructing gender, beauty within a capitalist narrative, and what love can look like in this strange new world. Her work won the Black Warrior Review Poetry Contest and was the recipient of the 2025 Spoon River Poetry Review Editors Prize. Her work has also been nominated for the Pushcart Prize. Oh, and Aaron Coleman selected that work, I should say. So it's very nice. This is the first time we've ever had an Editors Prize winner and the judge together as a meeting. Hopefully that more in the future. Her work's been nominated for the Pushcart Prize, commended for the Troubadour Poetry Prize, longlisted for the Disquiet Literary Prize, and has been recognized as a finalist for the Yellowwood Poetry Prize and the Epiphany Breakout Writers Prize. Her poems are forthcoming or appear in Rattle, Wildness, Nimrod, the Florida Review, Four-Way Review, Show Poetry Journal, Yearbook of Indian Poetry in English, and elsewhere. She's a founding member of the Girls Right Now Intersectional Voices in Teaching Committee. Vasvi is a recipient of the Al Young Memorial Scholarship from the Community of Writers Conference, and her writings also received support from Tin House, Martha's Vineyard Institute of Creative Writing, and the Watering Hole. In the introduction to the award-winning poem that she won the Editor's Prize for, Winter Solstice in the Land of No Winters, Aaron Coleman notes that he is stunned by this poem's ability to convey the multiform nature of a name across place and time. These transformations express sorrow, the sublime, something like humor, and so much more. Not just for the speaker, but for a community reckoning with the lacunae of loss. The poem refuses any easy conclusion and instead demands that we as readers dwell within its tensions. That tautness, albeit in grief, strains and sings the restless vigor of being alive, of carrying some of your light. I know this is a poem that I'll come back to as I consider the names of loved ones and my own name too. Join me in welcoming Vasvi Kejriwal.
So much you concern for the words. For a second there, I was like, is that me?
It's you.
Right. I'm just gonna begin. So I'm gonna start with two poems titled Excerpt from Study of Gender, which is actually a side project I'm working on. And I don't think I've actually read them out loud. It would be exciting and fun for me to do. Excerpt from Study in Gender. They're all written in footnotes, I should say. So I'll just say 1, 2, 3, not in that. Footnotes or endnotes. Excerpt from Study in Gender. 1. Because he is man, Uncle A can piss with the door open. Because she is woman, Auntie A cannot enter the kitchen or the temple when her body is beaten. 2. In Spencer, the Princess of Wales links the voices of the equerry and palace authorities to the sound of doors closing. Christmas means feeling buried in blankets, so she might undress with the curtains open. In another sequence, the princess rips a string of pearls off her neck. One by one, the beads fall into her soup. She spoons each orb, biting into every perfect sphere. The audience does not know if it is soup or pearl inside her mouth, if we are inside her mind or outside it. Next, we see her throw up in a royal toilet. The silver rope still collars her neck, as if she were an obedient pet. The door shut behind her. 3. Her voice often like a pin trapped inside a door whose key has been misplaced, or worse, been withheld. 4. In the Hindi dictionary, every noun belongs to gender, marked with NF or NF. There is no gender that is unhe or unshe. A kutta is masculine, a kutia is feminine, and so on. 5. In English, when I say his dog or her dog, the gender of the dog is of no consequence. The attention is upon the gender of the possessor, not the possessed. In Hindi, we focus on the possessed. Uski kutia could mean either her bitch or his bitch. 6. For every door that opens, there's a door always closing. 7. For 2 centuries, how effortlessly the English possessed our subcontinent. 8. The word for dandelion in French quite literally means to piss in bed, and the word for vagina belongs to the masculine. 9. The word parent has several anagrams: pant, rent, taper, pair, bear, year, tear, tap, burnt, bent, feet, near, nape, trap, entrap, entrap, entrap. 10. From the poet's group chat, I read an account of a young lady in her 20s who matched on Hinge with a famous writer in his 50s. Though she was 29, he asked her on a date, thinking she was 21. By the time she was led into his apartment, he was already positioned, legs open, on his gilded armchair, rubbing coconut oil onto his foreskin. 11. Auntie A lifts the tap in her sleep. Nothing leaves the faucet. She stares and stares at the empty air, hoping her gaze will transform it into water. 12. Fist-sized mandarins pull the bow to the ground. The fruit hovers just above earth, but does not touch. A deer beacon, Andy Warhol's single painting Shadows, is stretched across 102 canvases. The exhibit note states how he wished for the canvases to be hung edge to edge and low to the ground, but not too low to be kicked. 13. Her face appears like a smashed flower pot and reintegrates back into a hole. The next one, excerpt from Studying Gender Engineering. 1. 10 days before Dr. A turned 15, her body bled for the first time. She woke up to blood raining from a crevice between her legs. Not a crevice, but a cloud. Not a cloud, but a patch of moss. Not moss, but a metaphor. Not a metaphor, but a silence. Auntie A glanced at the blood, then turned away, for this is where in the body language ends, and we call it a period. 2. Afternoons end with Auntie supine, the television blaring, always along the periphery of her existence, like a fan's hot breath. 3. The women in the television eat air. Due to budget cuts, the set designers put no care to even pretend to fill their plates, while they serve their television husbands big, fluffy puris to tear open their teeth. 4. A mother-in-law is upset at her daughter-in-law for working long hours. When the older woman yells, the camera cuts in on her single golden tooth. Every muscular movement mapped, the jaw taken from various angles. Every 6.5 minutes, CTV cuts to the Stay Free advert. Before the woman can wear a pad and curl into a stain-free, stress-free sleep, Uncle A has switched to the news. His fingers extended over the remote, ready like the hind limbs of a horse. 5. A body curls into a question and becomes a mark. Then I'm going to move on and read 2 poems titled Force Majeure, because I'm thinking a lot about force majeure as a legal term for an act of God, and I'm thinking a lot about what that does. It's a staple boilerplate term in a legal contract, and it means that if an act of God happens, an unprecedented act, then the obligations under that contract go void. And I'm thinking a lot about what that means. How do we define an act of God? So it's 2 quick poems. Force majeure. 11 blocks from Park Avenue and 51st, held by stone above water, I hear whispers of a shooting. At first, as if something remote had taken place within the confines of a screen, not a skyscraper with an eye line, as the man might have placed his index on the trigger, the pad of his thumb cushioning the backstrap before launching it into the associate, her 27-year-old frame. Em and I watched tourists try on I Heart New York t-shirts. Liberty blinked in the distance while the news blinked in the shape across our screens. Then we saw the tourists run, and so we ran with them. 20 blocks south, a bracelet of office squares shimmied along the East River, the bridge in hot air as steam rose from the asphalt. Its cables curved into a parabola, a lower jaw to eat the tension of the road deck. The water ran cold beneath us. M lifted his hands, asked, "Do you feel suspended?" The elevator, suspended on nothing but rope and pulley, carried the man with the gun. Someone turned off the lights on the 77th floor. Vendors kept selling their guava. They sliced the fruits before panning them in plastic cups. On the bridge, the crowd moved with the inertia of a large gray cloud. Some of us came from work, some from hospitals and parks and schools, some from nowhere. The deck measured just a little over a mile, yet it felt as though we would need the whole night to make our way across. Next poem is also titled Force Majeure. This is a self-erasure piece, so I'm going to read out the prose block first that is written by me, and then the erasure of that block. On the same day you called me a beautiful babushka doll, we bumped into a man who confessed he was trying to populate heaven. But unfortunately, you'll have to die first to get there. The falls behind us, stone, still, and blue, like his eyes, blue and piercing, like Christ. And of course, he mistook you for Latino, even though you requested a Bible in Tamil. We stood at the viewing deck alongside a bouquet of perfumed girls, their identical mews like pretty pink screens. They offered to photograph us so that we might make photos of them, long shot, ground level, side eye. And the man with Christ's eyes said, "You don't seem like the kind you would like to fall off a viewing deck. You seem like good, kind folks. And would it have been unkind to slip into the void, trusting it to carry us?" It was the same day you assumed the light marks on my wrist were from my dollar store bracelet. I let you convince me that McDonald's was a cultural experience. We ate fries, sweating oil on red laminated paper, the arches of gold loomed above us. We departed the I-95. While I was a grandma, you were a hellboy. Just then, an 18-wheeler, ill-begotten and limbless, almost sent us flying. A man confessed, "You'll have to die." Still, he mistook you for a Bible. So we shot the man with Christ's eyes like good, kind folks, the cultural arches of gold above us. I was a hellboy, flying. Then I have a few more poems. For your attention. These are two short poems called Origami. One clean square, two folds. I love building from newspapers. 31 capsized in Kerala boat disaster. I fold this into a boat and it floats. Air India crash, 263 dead. I fold this into a bird, it flies. The bride who burned alive for no dowry. She becomes the rose. Then I have another one. This is a catalog, a list poem. It's called On My Morning Commute, I Spot the Flag. Adhered to the door of an ambulance. Planted in a broken flower pot with a toothpick. On subway car 5079 as it departs. On subway car 5082 as it arrived. Lacquered upon nails gripped around the stanchion. Inside a mouth, sesame seeds stuck between tri-colored bands and wire braces. Pinned onto a haversack, morale patched onto a boy's conscience, repeated along a waistband of grief, flashing momentarily. Next poem is a bird watching poem. It's a bird watching poem, it's a silent poem, and it's also like a legal poem. So I'm gonna try and I don't know how to So I'm gonna just read out a little, like it's the epigraph, I would say it's the epigraph, or the note at the back of the manuscript, that's where it would go. So under the Endangered Species Act, it is illegal to take an endangered species. So according to Section 3, the term take means to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, collect, or attempt to engage in any misconduct. And in 2025, of course, under this administration, a rule change was proposed to redefine the word harm, which would essentially prohibit only actions that directly hurt or kill animals and not their habitats. So if finalized, change could make it easier to log, mine, build on lands that species need to thrive on. And so this poem was born as an attempt to redefine that legal definition as a whole by displacing its context. Using the definition of harm from the Endangered Species Act to describe a Saturday. Saturdays are for going to the Hanuman temple and praying against harm, and stealing prasad and watching parrots swing through the green. A rump and tail shoots up a branch like a flame, combusts in flight. We launch our sight and pursue the bird by patting down the leaves. Before takeoff, those dogs being harassed by squirrels. Soon they emerge like little black desktop arrows, collecting in V's across the sky. Father is the kind to believe we're capable of killing, that neglect is a form of death. So we may watch funny cat videos, but may not get wound up on the idea of adopting a pet. He won't hug often, but he'll attempt to engage in other ways. He'll read to me about how irrigation works, and together we'll capture the flitting of pinions to a pixelated image. At times, a caudal detail will appear cracked in a ball of light, the upper tail coverts burned out, overexposed. After failed efforts to hunt with binoculars, he'll direct me to a hooked beak, flashing to the sycamore. He'll take my hand, lift and point. Still, I won't succeed, but his eagerness will make me pretend I did. So this poem I'm going to read next, it was written at a time when I found myself preoccupied with the idea of incubation, time lapse between contracting a fatal illness and when the body succumbs. And that's when Catherine Barnett, one of my mentors, suggested I read Marie Howe's Magdalene and the Seven Devils, which I feel can read a sort of list of admissions. And so my first draft took the shape of a rewrite of my own list. And the first one I put down was being late and unpunctual. So here it goes. It's called After. After my father died, every man I dated wore a bodysuit. I only discovered this up close. Each time I unzipped the suit to find my father underneath. I wanted them all to like me, even when I might not have liked them. I arrived late everywhere. Had it become impossible to stare at a tree without keeping someone waiting? My neighbor's people grew first in, then out of the stone walls like a beautiful ghost. I shortened my skirt, 2 fingers above the knee for the boys at school, sweatpants covering ankles for my father. In the 576 hours during which he was dying, I was not present. By dying, I mean dying faster than the speed at which all of us are dying. I refused to fly across the Atlantic in a tin can to see him. When the nurse put my FaceTime through, his skin had shriveled. The oxygen supply muffled his hello. Over his jagged breath, he wanted me to know he was still a good man. And I had trouble believing him, because there was no reason for me to believe him, because he was not dying. I spent 4 out of those 576 hours at H&M. That makes 0.69%, shrugging off turtlenecks. On this continent, he was not dying. I kept arriving late to places. I blamed the chains and the irreversible force majeure of death more than once. Someone had slipped whilst hopscotching between the A and the M cars. Even my belief arrived late. There was no use for it by the time it arrived. The nurses had never seen anything like this. Wow, my father texted before the coma. But I refused to believe that my father was a person who could die. I did not pray to the gods to save his breath, even though he believed in them. even though I held no disbelief towards my father's gods, only ambivalence. I arrived at the 5:87 hour. His body had been swallowed by the fire. I arrived late everywhere. The sun swelled, announcing the fiscal year end, and the IRS deadline had come to pass. Still, I kept waiting and waiting for when he'd wait. Wow, he texted, and I forget why. Was it the Wi-Fi discount? I waited forever to hear him say this, or the snowfall in May. Now I will read the poem that Aaron Coleman very kindly chose. Winter Solstice in the Land of No Winters. This was written when I spent a winter in Trinidad, and I felt really connected to the place. That's been so much. I was just like, just like I was observing everything around me, and yeah, I was reading a lot of Tall Phillips too. So, like grass growing from beneath the buckled pavement, your name keeps interrupting the shortest day of the year. Last night in my dream, you were with a woman, not my mother. You were faceless, so was she. I noticed you carried no guilt. Your joy pierced through my sleep. I could not see her face. I felt relieved. Something resembling you, I'd like to think your spirit filled your guava pink short sleeve, maneuvered it through the cars, the train longer than a century. Her hand cushioned into the depression of your elbow. Here the sun never set. You liked that you could never leave. I liked that you could never get to where you were going on the subway of my dreams. I could keep you. For a fun fact, my friend says I live on an island and cannot swim. Her best friend has a name, once yours. Maxi taxis have it painted on their bumpers because there's a pop artist here by your name, the locals dislike. On printed polythene, he's reduced to king of chutney, tattooed jock scarfing down pint of stag. I snort at a tree because I imagine tattooed tricep view, buzz cut, also a date. Grief makes us do weird things, like leaving out nonsense incarnation, as if you were God on the other side of the threshold. This grass is breathless, untamable, finally sky. What if this is as close as you'll get to having an afterlife? 2. On a winged assault thing, the scarlet ibises return, having flown to another country just this morning. Still the shortest day of the year. Their pinions the shade of washed out Chianti, similar to the guava of you. Why equate new time only with new things? What about the sound your uncremated name still makes against my mouth? Or the ibises that do this back and forth each day? Your name is the shape the sun makes on my tongue, will always make in our language. People I've never met before catalog ways in which you move them. They now move through the world different, carrying some of your light. 3. Without you, the alumni met. Pavan's daughter was valedictorian, the Bangers had opened a cafe, and Mrs. Shah, widowed, painted her nails for the first time after her man slid off their roof like a kite that never launched. 4. A name without body is how a kite without sky or wind or pilot is not a kite, only wire, paper, string, but still looks like a thing to be trusted, pitched. Like a name looks like a thing to be spoken, but without recipient is only wave, sound strummed on mouth, pressure applied to air. 5. I carry the dead weight of your name tucked under my tongue. I use it to call out to someone, not you. I carry your name like a dried up water skin tucked under a Bedouin's robe, like a bell that can only be unrung each time its clapper is struck. Like how Auntie B, when she first left home in a sari, the only clothing she owned, learned to hold banknotes tucked under the seam of her blouse. I imagine her skin cold against the security threaded papers of promise. She slept with them, forged to broken rice for stones, took them with her when she faced in the dark dawn of the alley into the milkless, sea-black sky. With them, she did everything except bathe, because no pockets. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. Because running a poetry journal is hard, But we also like to do nice things. We started a new tradition this year, and we have broadsides of Vasvi's poem Winter Solstice in the Land of No Winters available if you make a donation to SRPR to keep the journal going. Now is the time before I introduce Aaron Coleman to go through the litany of gratitude and thanks that I have for all the people that are involved in making this event happen. So first of all, I want to thank the Department of English Chair, Catherine Ellison, Department of English Lead Staff, Jean Merkel, who is instrumental to making the plans for the poets to be here. None of the stuff that happens at the Department of English would happen without her. So you can cheer for it if you want. Also want to thank Publications Unit Assistant Director Phil Spotswood, the SRPR Poetry Graduate Worker and Managing Editorial Assistant Simon McBreen, Professors Mike Tooney and Joanne Diaz over at Illinois Wesleyan, as well as Amy Alderman, who's also very instrumental in making this collaborative effort happen. Yeah, you can cheer for Amy. She deserves a lot of applause because she also set up the reception that's happening and she where we can have more time for community and conversation, things like that. All right, of course, I'd like to thank Lisa Lofgren and Kendra Pates and all the folks here at University Galleries for letting us use this incredible space to share poetry and community, especially amid the student annual, which is super wonderful. I want to thank Liz Asbury and the entire staff from Bob's Bay for doing all the book sales at the events. Be sure to support local booksellers. They're the only indie bookstore in town. And I don't know what I'd do without having an indie bookstore in town. Finally, I'd like to thank the Harold K. Sage Foundation, the Illinois State University Foundation Fund, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the Department of English for allowing us to bring this wonderful event to the community by way of their generous support. Now, to introduce the inimitable Aaron Coleman. Aaron Coleman's a poet, translator, educator, and scholar of the African diaspora. He's the recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts, Cave Canem, the Fulbright Program, and the American Literary Translators Association. Also, what's up? His most recent poetry collection, Red Wilderness, was released in 2025 from Four Way Books and was named a Library Journal 2025 Title to Watch and a Poetry Northwest Spring 2025 favorite. His debut poetry collection, Threat Come Close, was the winner of the Great Lakes Colleges Association New Writers Award, and his chapbook, St. Trigger, won the Button Poetry Prize. He is also the translator of the fabulous Afro-Cuban poet Nicolas Guillen's 1967 collection, The Great Zoo, selected for the Phoenix Poets Series by the University of Chicago Press, and also was a finalist for the prestigious Griffin Poetry Prize last year. His poems, essays, and translations have appeared in publications like the New York Times, Boston Review, Callaloo, Poetry Magazine, as well as our very own SRPR. From Metro Detroit, Coleman has lived and worked with youth in locations including Spain, South Africa, Chicago, St. Louis, and Kalamazoo. He's an assistant professor of English and comparative literature in the Helen Zell Writers Program at the University of Michigan. I first encountered Aaron's work through one of my mentors, Kristen Dykstra, who's a great champion of poetry and translation, especially from Cuba. I think she encouraged me or was part of the planning for an AWP offsite event in Ybor City in Tampa, where I got to see you read your work. And I've been following you ever since. So I kind of got into your poetry through your translation. And I was really, happy to learn that the books matched the translation that I heard that day. I've always looked up to you as a literary citizen. I think you're brilliant, kind, generous with your time, your mind, your talents, and your art. You embody the kind of literary citizen that I try my best to be. We're also both part of this small group of contemporary poets I know who also play college football. So it's you and me and Bruce Smith and Ross Gay.
Right.
Who else is in this club?
That might be it.
And I love that some of your work explores what it means to be an athlete and a Black athlete as well. I'm so pleased you can join us. My only regret is that we could never play on a football team together. As I get older, I get that Jones to play football, and I never had a teammate like you. I would have really liked it.
We were on the line together.
Yeah.
We were on the line together.
Yeah. But, chubby kids.
Yep.
Well, maybe not you, but me.
Me too. Me too.
So it's my great privilege to bring you up here. Thanks for being here.
Oh man, Steve, you got me all emotional here, but thank you so much for that introduction and for doing the kind of full-fledged, can y'all hear me? Thank you. Yeah, doing the full-fledged um thank yous because I was gonna begin there as well too. Um, and obviously I didn't get a chance to meet as many of the folks, but I just want to echo some of that thanks because I do feel like um, you know, none of this happens without so many hands coming together to make it happen. So um, first, Steve, just I feel like I'm trying to live up to the literary citizen that you are, both as a poet and translator. So, thank you so much for the invitation and Spoon River Poetry Review and the Getsi reading of the 50th anniversary. It's amazing to be here. I wanted to thank Jean Merkel on all our emails. I've never seen her in person, but she saved me. Joey Diaz, Amy at Illinois Wesleyan as well, Lisa at the University Galleries, everyone that's involved in making this possible. It's an honor to be here. So I'm going to read from a little bit of everything. And I usually have an idea of where I'm going to go, and I have something of a map, but I've been getting more intuitive with it. So I'll just try to feel it out. But we'll begin in the city of tenderness and desperate promises. Punctured in the soft hour, we tried a new way. Past the pawn shop, neon green with memory, she came away with me from broken roads. Bird bone litters tall, forgotten weeds. We paused to try to see inside each fractured hollow. But hard rain hurried us as slanted ground that was a risk became a gulch. Silent, tilted heads appeared to prey on a passing city bus, but eyes lie. Who am I to say that I have seen too much to trust another stranger, to learn to start over? The end got here before us. Each footprint deep and flooded with chemical runoff, technicolor surfaces, but no real border. Bones don't float, the birds or our own. The root turned blue and bottomless, but it wasn't waves and isn't water, just consequence. We wander in wet, endless sound and learn to call it falling until she says, this love is a decision, not to forget, but to keep going. Nothing else. I wonder if we are bound to drown in chance and mangled maps. Slick with rain, rock, moss, riots, money green until tornado green. Churning like our city's restless silence. Should say that poem's dedicated to St. Louis, which was my home for 8 years before I moved back up to Michigan. Well, I'm already going to veer off because we talked about the sport thing. I'm going to read American football. Yeah. What to do with the role that sport has in the culture, and what it has to do with the ways we come to see ourselves. Has an epigraph that's pulled actually from the poem. I wanted to be a trophy before I wanted to be a man. I wanted to be a weapon before I wanted to be safe. My helmet is a mask. Pencil-thin bars cage my face. Fiberglass and hard white pads hug my skull. I know the boy I am. I know the boy in the body of a man who wants to be precise violence, a skilled thread on a torn field. Our bodies decorate the Colosseum ground. We reset and collide. We draw each line where faith bangs against brutality, where pain headlongs into desire. I remember my ringing ears and trotting softly to the sideline called home after I launched my body into a boy who cradles a ball and escapes in zagging lines, side to side as if his life depends on it. Get up off the ground. I fear what I've done to my body. My blood filled with the sound of mothers chanting battle cries over their rampant sons, the quiet, brooding fathers. Maybe I'll always be the boy trying to find the eyes of a miraculous girl lolling in the stands, deep in her own game, looking away from the cage over my face. Sprawled in my first autumn, I learned the taste of my own sweat. To be Black in uniform defines my body as a sacrifice. I wanted to be a trophy before I wanted to be a man. I wanted to be a weapon before I wanted to be safe. I fear I'm still that brutal dream, body strapped inside devotion. I can't imagine my calloused hands relaxed at my sides, tenderness level. One more sport poem here before we move on. One time I was watching the NBA draft, 2019, saw Zion Williamson, Ja Morant, RJ Matisse, RJ, I can't remember his last name, Matisse Thybulle, all these black all these black, maybe, all these black players from around the diaspora. And what seemed to be the thing that was holding everything together is that they all were crying. They were all crying in that moment. And yeah, I just thought about what was in those tears. Draft Nautical Brothers Association. I see the tall, young Black men crying on national TV, bowing their heads, weeping, even sobbing. Their voices gasp and spill, stutter and fly as they reach for the crutch of word and steady sound. Broad shoulders jitter and sputter as their muscles make movements I have never seen before and only felt happening inside myself, while wildly weeping in a car on the side of the road with someone I love, or alone, in a dark, wet field, tired, surrounded by the company of night. In an empty gym once too, and in a foreign, quiet living room. But where am I now? I distract myself here, buoyed by the night, bathed blue and American in soft electric light. I watch these men on live TV with wonder. What Blackness is becoming is releasing some stitch of pain, some wall of fear to find our way to unknown pains and fears. Yes, but I saw so many young giants in the culture crying, letting go of tears of joy and something else, floating away, out in the open, in front of teenage strangers donning jerseys stitched with their new cities and names, in front of Black and white women, young and old, in front of uneasy white men in suits and money, in front of bright screens, microphones, and the silent eyes of cameras. I always knew there was something blue inside of freedom. My guess is we won't sink, even though there's no rest as we crest with the water. There's a river flooding the city inside us. There's a surge, bloody as history, silty as time, leaking past the sandbags, crossing the makeshift shores that keep the kin I love. I watch and feel this American spectacle the way I imagine the cruise ship custodian watches and feels the ocean at night as he mops and shines the deck, biding his time. So a little more spectacle, go to a poem called Late in the Feature Film. When I turn the TV on, the young American hero is finally beginning to recognize himself, finally accepting that mystic cosmic ritual of post-almost defeat, coronation with luscious synchronous sound roaring in the background. The music, more than the scene, is a coming coal blue, green, and muddy brown waterfall out of sight, up ahead. We, the plural anonymous, are already in it, the pull already lifting the weight we felt. His smooth touch made just rough enough by the tear of narrative. The gravel in his voice is sex. I'm just a gendered being sitting on the couch enthralled and shook by my easy thrall in all of it, watching him with women, how expressions skim across bodies. Now the rush picks up and I'm stuck in the final 30 minutes of this feature, caught in my personal darkness, soaked in my Byzantine clutter of personal effects, their faint scent of a life before this. Other times, people, all of it, reminding me that I have come here along some far way through relations and places, jobs and languages, scuttle with blueprints of belief, paper mache to make memory, identity, the swelling hero on screen wants blood. But first, he must sit in a midday highway diner booth, must listen across from an oracular child who dips a finger into a loopy maze, babbles and traces a path on a kids eat free placemat map, colored in busted crayon, red, yellow, blue, destined for the hero and child as characters, as actors, the crew workers, producers, parents, handlers, agents, and pages, etc., and me, plus whoever else watches, whoever else leans and loafs in their personal darkness, given over to the nighttime tick of anonymous revelry. All of us must wonder, how did I get here? Did I choose this for me? The answer matters less than the wonder. Collectively, I feel it. Here we are in some crescendo, swept up in the signature music, fantastical, possibly deadly. Okay, where are we going? All right, so I think one of the, I talked about this during a conversation that was really incredible at Illinois Wesleyan this afternoon, but the backbone of this book, and it was fun to kind of read it that way without getting into what I feel like is the backbone of the book, are a sequence of poems that begins with my ancestor, one of my cousins in 2018 in the Susquehanna Valley in Pennsylvania found his tombstone outside of an abandoned one-room church that was falling in on itself. And his tombstone on it said, Pennsylvania 25th Colored Infantry. This is my great-great-great-grandfather. And that just kind of lit my mind up because I had never thought that it would be possible to find any kind of record of my family that far into the past, especially, you know, so few of us have that, and even fewer Black Americans have that kind of opportunity. And so that sent me to do a lot of research about where the Pennsylvania 25th Colored Infantry was at different points during the Civil War. I learned that when he enlisted in January of 1864, he wrote that in the enlistment papers that he had escaped from slavery in Burrillville, Virginia, and that as I read the about just other materials, one of them that became key is a book called History of the Pennsylvania Volunteers by Samuel Penniman Bates. And if you have a copy of the book, or it's on, I think, World Literature Today on their webpage, I made this strange erasure map of that document that sort of tries to pull another story out of it. An erasure is kind of a technique that one way or another obscures some of the language to make possible another story within the text. That's an offhand definition. But I think I found some other story in the text, and I'll read that now. This part was in the field. A tenant was ordered to proceed among freedmen, which constitute accordingly the sailed wing of a storm, a sprung leak, the rose of fires, the ship's operation. The men were buckets and ours afloat. She was the harbor. She was time closely pressing. Here kept the emergency. When the wing without a rival encamped above the city, the new Red River modified banks refused to go to sing. The men charged, and the men became detached and placed, mobile in the field. Purpose colored the old new, but arrangements threatened movement and became the siege. It drilled the field, which After spring and summer suffered from life, the time amounted to want of food, urgent, until disease answered. The forts ordered vice. The flag was colored. It represented bondage fallen in the eager form of liberty. After return and the close last parade, that city, this flag presented the poet, receiving half and responding to the language. I desire, spree, co, and a bear. Having seen in my connection some degree of time, I would be fire. It would be question, an opportunity, never afforded, the always felt grievance. And so one of the stories that I learned from that text that kind of tells the story of so many different units of the Pennsylvania volunteers during the Civil War was that my ancestors' unit was aboard a ship called the Suwannee that was on its way down to Vicksburg to be a part of the siege of Vicksburg, but they got caught in a place called Cape Hatteras off of the coast of Carolinas, which is notoriously seen as a kind of graveyard for ships because the waters are so tempestuous there. And I think often about the fact that my ancestor had to survive that near shipwreck in order for me to be here standing in front of you today. And I think about what all of the stories we know and don't know of what we had to survive in order for all of us to be here today. So this poem kind of is born of that moment. Another strange land, downpour off Cape Hatteras, March 1864. First, a penny-sized hole in the hull, then eager salt water rushing over us in clouds, swirling and clotting the moonlight. No time to stop and look upon it as the hole erupts into an iron mouth, screeching as it peels and tears open iron as iron should not open, muffled and heavy. Us turning underwater, we confuse the metal echo and thunder as the same death knell from God's mouth. We've been done, floated all this way down in dark blue used uniforms. How far from slavers' dried out fields in Virginia, Pennsylvania, wherever we came from, now we barely and only see and hear an ocean whipped into storm. Not horror, not glory, but storm. Not fear, not power, but focus on the work of breathing, living as the storm rocks us and our insides upside down, turns hardtack into empty nausea. So close to death, I thought I saw the blaze-sick fields of burial again, curling fingers of tobacco, hurt fruit and flower, but no. I say no to death now. I'm nobody's slave now. I'm alive and not alone, one of those who escaped and made myself a soldier, a weapon, a stone in David's sling, riding the air above the deep. I grow more dangerous to those who want me. I ain't going back to anywhere I've been before. I grab a bucket, you grab a bucket. We, the 25th Pennsylvania Colored Infantry, newly formed and too alive and close to free to sink below this midnight water. 36 hours, chaos, shoveling, lifting, throwing, ocean back into ocean to reach land in war in the Carolinas. I stole my body back from death and going down more than once. I steal my breath tonight and every night. I will not drown. Let's see. And so, I think a lot of the other poems I'm just going to read the poem. This one's called I Found Kin in a Thrift Store Photograph. Yeah, shouts out. Above my bed, a black boy leans, his chin down on the dark wood of a small bridge, his arms loose over the edge, far above the rushing water, his fingers Let the wind's anonymous grace spill through him. The night is cinders, flecks of bluish white and human red trapped inside the sky. His face so, swept up in shadow, his expression is full of the unknowable. A Black boy's body is a language sculpted out of silence, outside of time, inside the picture. This anonymous child has come to be my family somehow. His legs sway with the framed waves at the same pace. Loneliness slips beneath the surface of intuition, floods the warm current called desire. On the far side, I will never see. His spine is my creation limb, a bone river of redemption, a choice to live despite unkeepable love. This religion of slow loss, balanced on the balls of his feet. Okay, where are we going? So those poems, like I said, they start with that Civil War moment, but they go through all the generations of the Great Migration to how my family ended up in Detroit. And on my dad's side, my mom's side is there in Pennsylvania. My dad's side comes from northern Louisiana, Texarkana, Arkansas, Texas. And off this poem that I'll read next called "The Bright River We Keep" it's dedicated to my great grandmother, Hattie Mae, and just thinking about the generation that stayed there, rather than the generations that came north. The bright river we keep. The broken rhythm of potholes and worn paint points us south along the long road we wanted and traced, but feared to speed down. Sun and heavy as an old growth tree trunk uprooted floats in loose parallels down the bright river we keep glimpsing behind aisles of slender forest and ever hills. Nowheres are everywhere. Juniper wood slices past us as we go, shrewd and unabashed angles take turns working the mud grass shore. I remind me to breathe. I don't know when to touch you or myself, so I keep my hand against my face. What does carefulness do to love? Where are courage and loss taking us? And do I have a choice? What's chasing us? I know. I've known. A chance of sirens ambles over the slow blue bend of this time, touches horizon haze in front of us. Heat gambles sweat down my spine as we cross brittle railroad tracks, getting farther, so getting closer. Up ahead, the sign I didn't know we needed clinks and hums. I hear and I believe an old engine churning and rolling its metal realm closer and closer to us. Red dirt tests my lungs. I trust the sunset light on the far side of my closed eyes. Let me go now. Pull over. You can go. So let's see. All right, we're going to change it up a little bit here. How are we doing time? About a couple more poems here, just a couple more. Okay, let's. Well, I met a wonderful poet this evening that mentioned that he did my work the honor of sharing some of the same poems from Threat Come Close with his class. So I'm going to go ahead and thank you, Gabe, and I'm going to go ahead and read one of the same poems that is part of a series in Threat Come Close, which are all these imagined saints that I made up. And I'm so interested in the idea of saints. Think about sort of the kind of intimacy and distance of saints, not quite angels. I was also living in St. Louis. So I made my own hagiography of saints, saint inside and out. Being tornado, being wind stuck, being swamp swallowed and forgotten, being gangster gone ghost, being leaking and prohibited, being rugged smirk and gut exposed, stone church roof removed, ivy spindled throat, being forever far from coasts, being echo clang and shale sick grease rag, being trundled down the conveyor belt, the wound, wound river being time tight, squeezing and seething and flooding. Being Bernhardt and holy jelly roll, squall and squalor and ma called squaw, battered and missing shame-laden eyes. Being missed and called family, anchor, last name gone. Being turned into translation, being altar, being mother praying, God save me in a language I'll never know. Being hands held high above head, body blown. Being bit nickel never trusted, being runaway sharecropper, castrated, burned away in pieces in hand-licked heavy envelopes, being letters scrawled, you missed a big fiery one, wish you were here. Being midnight ripped off the face of constellation, being rage shattered in the body, before each risk I live, let die, follow. Man, I haven't read that poem in a while. We need to know that we need another saint. Saint who? Who is not callous, not cattle, moving in sequence, a cataract of time, a blue-grained lusciousness, a green side illumined in moon, who is not night corkscrewed, not chrysalis tearing into what we will call heavy in an eye? Who is not moon moving in sequence clobbered by time, blue or green lusciousness, or night side, a cataract of cattle illumined in corkscrews, chrysalises tearing into what we will call callousness? Who is not blue and heavy with time, moving in sequence, moon or green grain cattle amongst scattered chrysalises, corkscrewed into night called will, side, called, lusciousness tearing, illumined, called what we will? Who is not lusciousness corkscrewed in time, cattle scattered, a sequence side, illumined like grain, clobbered in moon blue, called a heavy chrysalis of will, cataract tearing, green night, callous, you and I. Let's see. All right, we're getting close here, so maybe I'll move to Kien. I'll close with Kien. All you need to know about the Great Zoo. It's a book that came out originally in 1967, A Gran Sol, by the great Afro-Cuban poet Nicolas Guillen, who was a contemporary of Langston Hughes, and he's often known for his work in the 30s. They were both journalists together during the Spanish Civil War. All you need to know is that every poem in the book is an animal in a cage in the zoo. But those animals are things as wild as the Mississippi and Amazon rivers, a guitar, clouds, winds, the KKK, police, atomic bomb, and the North Star. Maybe I'll just read two of them, or maybe three, because they're really short. This first one is called, maybe two, we'll see, we'll feel it out. All right, old folks, but three, two, but yeah, three, that's perfect, right? Split the difference. And I'll read the original text first. Guitarra. Fueron a cazar guitarras bajo la luna llena y trajeron esta, pálida, fina, esbelta, ojos de inagotable mulata, cintura de abierta madera, es joven. Apenas vuela, pero ya canta cuando oye en otras jaulas aletear sones y coplas. Los sones hombres y las coplas solas. Hay en su jaula esta inscripción. Cuidado, sueña, guitar. They went out hunting for guitars underneath the full moon, and they brought back her, pale, fine, lithe, ceaseless mulata eyes, a waist of open wood. She's young, just barely flies, but already she sings when she hears in other cages the flittering wings of sones and coplas. His somber sones and her lonely coplas. On her cage is this inscription: caution. She dreams. You know what? That's probably one of the ones that I read in Ybor City, because that was one of the first ones that really pulled me into it. Thanks for taking us back to that moment, Stan. Just two more, and thank you so much again. We got to read the rivers. I've been talking about the rivers. Los ríos. He aquí la jaula de las culebras. Enroscados en sí mismo, duermen los ríos, los sagrados ríos. El Mississippi con sus negros, el Amazonas con sus indios, son como los sunchos poderosos de unos camiones gigantescos. Riendo, los niños les arrojan verdes islotes vivos, selvas pintadas de papagayos, canoas tripuladas y otros ríos. Los grandes ríos despiertan, se desenroscan lentamente, enguyen todo, se hinchan, a poco más revientan y vuelven a quedar dormidos. The rivers. Here is the serpent's cage. Coiled up on themselves, the rivers, the sacred rivers, sleep. The Mississippi with its blacks, the Amazon with its Indians. They are like the powerful springs of gigantic trailer trucks. Laughing, children toss them, little green living islands, parrot-painted jungles, manned canoes, and other rivers. The great rivers wake up, uncoil themselves slowly, gobble down everything, swell, almost bursting, and then go back to sleep. I'll close with the North Star. La estrella polar. Se descongela sin remedio la estrella polar. 10 millones y aún más, diarios de toneladas. Hielo, luz fría, gas. Pierde de su estructura este inmenso animal. En los sitios básicos, verán, miren ustedes hacia allá, cómo nuestro equipo restaurador va colocando masas de algodón. Pero eso no puede bastar. Y dentro de 4 siglos a lo sumo, los navegantes tendrán que andar a tientas por el mar. ¡Qué responsabilidad! Al animal que más nos cuesta y el que menos se puede conservar. The North Star. It's melting helplessly. The North Star. 10 million or even more tons every day. Ice, cold light, gas, waste away from the frame of this immense animal. You will see, if you look just over there, how our team of conservators keeps putting puffs of cotton in the empty spaces. This won't be enough. And within 4 centuries at most, navigators will have to blindly feel their way across the sea. What responsibility? The animal that costs us most and the one we can conserve the least. Thanks.
I want to invite both the poets back up here for a little Q&A. I will come around to you with the mic if you have questions. Or I will stand here awkwardly while you're being shy, so please don't be shy. It's not just going to be me for the Q&A. It's going to be both of us.
And thank you, Steve, for thinking of having us together after the editor prize here.
Yeah.
What a special evening. Thank you so much, both of you. Let's see, Joanne referenced about a week ago, she brought a group of us together,
Right.
talk about your poem. And we spent a lot of time on this last poem, the North Star, that's called.
Yeah.
And what it meant. We're trying to unpack different things. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk us through it a little bit to get your perspective on that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you again, Joanne, for bringing that work to the class. And, yeah, it's the biggest. Can y'all hear me if I'm over here? It's the biggest honor to have y'all spend time with the work. Thank you. The thing about those poems in the zoo is I think that they really refuse easy answers in a way that is kind of disconcerting and unsettling, but also haunting in this way that I keep coming back to them. I think that's part of that sort of ambiguous emotional energy is probably one of the reasons why I wanted to translate it in the first place. But, just my own kind of take on that poem, having lived with it for a while now, I can't believe that Yen had the sort of imaginative wherewithal and wildness to use the North Star as a way to get at sort of ecological catastrophe and to put the question of everything, that it's melting helplessly. You're trying to fix it in this ridiculous way. And then cotton even feels charged. 400 years feels charged in a kind of transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, Columbus way. So I think it's kind of, there's something that's ecological, but there's something that's even wilder than that to think about the North Star as this giant animal that's in this cage. It just feels like something about that level of the scale of it, of impossible magnitude of the star, and then the kind of impossible parameters of this zoo space, just really kind of just unlocked new rooms in my mind. It's something that I've kind of been thinking of that way. And I think that's the best thing that translation can do is get us to think about things in new ways. So I don't necessarily have like a specific take, but I think it's this wild way to get us to consider Earth, to get us to consider the cosmos, to get us to consider our own responsibilities in relation to all of that, and to do it with such a tenderness and such a kind of completely unreal context is really, it just lands differently. It hits differently. I hope that kind of gets at it. Thank you. Don't be shy. We got a little too. Yeah. Oh yeah. Sure. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Please. Yeah. Feel free. Oh yeah. My wife.
First, I want to say both of you are like so talented. You guys were just great. And I really liked the Saints Inside and Not poem. We read it in my class and it was like really gripping. And I just, if you had anything more you wanted to say about it, I would love to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. No. And thank you, Vasvi. Yeah, it's been a great. Just shout out. Yeah, I feel like it's been awesome to be for sure. And thank you, Gabe, for sharing that poem with them. So I was living in St. Louis at the time that I started to think about this idea of coming up with my own kind of collective or fancy, kind of hagiography of saints. And I think, part of it has been my own sort of process of figuring out my own relationship to my own faith at the biggest scale. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, and what I learned from music there, what I learned about faith there is absolutely crucial. And also, I think that there's something else to the structure of my own way that I think about faith beyond that, which is still feels really tender for me to say, even I feel like hammered too. But so each one of those poems, I felt like it became. I'm really interested in the idea of persona, and persona kind of coming from the Greek, and persona poems, the Greek coming from the mask. And I feel like the saints were masks that I was able to put on that allowed me to sort of speak to kind of collage of topics in ways that I didn't know otherwise how to arrive at. And so there's those elements of history, a poem that I almost pivoted while I was reading it because that moment that I'm talking about some of the ancestry in there, there's a poem about my great-great-grandmother, Ma Shug, in the back deep woods of northern Louisiana. My dad used to go visit when he was a kid, which is, that story is kind of, part of the story that comes out inside and not in this piecewise way. So yeah, I think, there's that, But then there's also the broader American histories alongside the sort of personal fragments that we, that we know and that kind of, come to us both by a sort of family myth that's, it's hard to sort of discern the full contours of that and what's truth, what's myth, what's trauma, what's been passed down, what kind of inheritance is. So I think that all the saint poems for me have just been kind of personae that I can work with to kind of think about the idea of being both a saint inside and not. And in that case, there's a saint who, as I read, what are the other saints? There's a saint seduction. There's a Santa Soledad, and Soledad to me is one of my favorite words in Spanish because it means both solitude and loneliness. And those feel so different to me, but same word. There's some other saints. There's a Saint Casualty. Yeah, so I hope that kind of gets to it. They're kind of I'm grateful that I was asked to read it because I haven't read them in a while, and I think I'm still learning from them. I think to me, it's a reminder that we can, if we listen closely enough to the things that we're working on, we can continue to learn.
We get the privilege of hearing a poet who's been awarded an award by the other poet who's here. Do you mind, would you each mind saying a little something about perhaps what you heard in each other's work tonight? Is there connection? That feels like there was, but if you're willing to speculate or share on that, it'd be interesting to hear what you each heard. Thank you.
Is it Mike?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, you can go first. Well, I mean, I have some thoughts, but they're not organized.
Yeah.
As you were,
Such a question.
comes back. I mean, I think I'm really interested in. I think that something we talked about at the talk that we had earlier this afternoon at Illinois Wesleyan that Amy and Joanne organized was, I feel like I've struggled to figure out how to sort of let all the different parts of my voice coexist together. Like there's so much seriousness, I think, and sorrow in Brett Come Close. And I think it opens in certain ways in Red Wilderness. And I think that the Great Zoo sort of helps me think about other layers of that. But when I came across your poem, I felt like the expansive ways that you were able to kind of just touch with tenderness and complexity, the complexity of grief and kinship and, winter in the land of no winters, thinking about the Caribbean, thinking about the global South, thinking about all of our migratory roots. All those layers, I think, just really kind of made me deeply admire and learn from the poem. And I think that, finding a way, the way that you, at least in so many of the poems that you read tonight, to allow your voice to go in all those different directions. And there's humorous moments, and there's really dark humor, and then there's transcendent moments, and then there's incredible images. I mean, Train Longer Than a Century sent me out. So like, there's just a lot of different things that I think I admired in the dynamism of your voice. And the Carl Phillips connection is wild too, because Carl Phillips was my teacher, my MFA. So you reading Carl Phillips at that time, that's cool too.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that because you mentioned Cal Coast.
Yeah.
I do the connection. I think for me, what I heard tonight, and I think I've read your work before, but hearing you read it out, for me, it's like the prosody of the line. Like the fact that like I do all your lines, you could just like elastic and like a great way to like stretch them from both ends and become math and like just diet still. And I think that's really hard to do. And I think for me, that was something that has really like drawn me to your work. And I'm forgetting the name of the poem, but there's the poem about your grandfather in the infantry. I think
Oh, yeah,
maybe-
great. Yeah,
Great
another strange land.
grandfather,
Yeah,
sorry.
another strange land.
Right, it's a strange land, and then just the idea of towing ocean off ocean, or the idea of moonlight, seeing it, but then we're not seeing it, and it's just like we get an image and then it gets negated just as quickly. I think for me that that really drew me in, that kind of momentum. And just like the language there, like throwing ocean off ocean. And I was automatically thinking about land and shoveling land, but then water. And just like that, I think there's like some synesthesia going on there. Where you implement, like we see land, but you're talking about ocean, and there's just so much being done in those 4 or 5 words. Yeah, it was something that really spoke to me.
There's something synesthetic in your work too, for sure. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the prosody because that music, there's Carl again. But
Right,
thinking
yeah.
about the music of the line. But I feel like, yeah, the tension between music and image, I feel that in your poems. Maybe not even tension, the kind of interweaving of music and image. I feel that in a lot of your poems too. And I kind of aspire towards that sometime. Good question. Thanks. Put us on the spot.
Yeah,
That's a cool one, though. That's a really great question here.
Okay, thank y'all both for such a great reading. This question is for both of y'all. So I'm just like really fascinated by people who work in multiple languages. And so I'm wondering how you factor in that multilingualism to your writing, or how it affects your own writing, or how you compartmentalize that.
That's a really good question. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
There's so many different threads to that question, or answering that question. I think I don't know how to write without bringing in Hindi, even though my native tongue is both Hindi and English. I just don't know how to do it. Wouldn't feel truthful to the experience of the poem. And I've actually also started bringing in words in Hindi without translating it in my work. So it's hard to explain it when you read it out, but visually you wouldn't see the word in English. It would be in Hindi. And I think I don't think that fits with maybe every poem. I think it really depends on what what the writer is trying to convey. For instance, nazar is a word that means vision in Hindi, but it also means evil spirit. And it's a superstitious word. So once you sort of like had got, or believe that you've like got the evil spirit, and then there are all these superstitions about how do you ward it off, or how do you get it out of your body. And for a poem about nazar, it seemed right to keep nazar in the Hindi alphabet, because nazar is looked at as a strange outcast, like something to ward off, and so to sort of challenge that idea of when you bring in a word in a otherwise completely English poem, what is the gaze on that word? Is that word looked at like an outcast in the realm of the poem, for instance? Whereas I think there are other poems where it would not serve the purpose. Like it would be maybe right to include the English phonetic translation of the word, because then it would sort of be like, oh, I'm just like, I personally would feel I'm trying too hard, or I'm trying to tokenize my culture now. So I think it's so different poem to poem, but if that touches upon what you've asked, I will now hand it over.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great to hear you sort of think out loud about that too. Yeah, I mean, I do definitely feel like for me, every poem asks its own questions about what it might need from whatever languages. It's wild to me that, so I'm not a heritage speaker of Spanish or of French. You've heard a little French come up in the map, the Ranger poem, but that was just already in the text that I was doing the erasure of. I think, coming to learn Spanish and French, really the thing that I gained the most is that it abstracted English for me. It really helped me take a step back from English and see the puzzle pieces of English in a different way. That probably unlocked the music in my poem in a different way, and the syntax. So there's that. I mean, in Red Wilderness, I have a poem that's completely in Spanish. and I've written, well, I said this a little bit earlier, but I lived in Spain for several years, and my partner's family is part of the family's in Colombia, and so I translate, like I said, from Cuba. I taught in bilingual high school on the west side of Chicago for a while, and so my Spanish is kind of a mishmash of many different Spanishes, and I think my English is also a mishmash of many different Englishes. And I revel in the possibilities of that. I mean, one of the things that I talk about in my kind of more traditional critical work and essays and stuff is this idea that so many of the languages that we identify with the African diaspora in the Atlantic world, whether it's Spanish, French, Portuguese, Dutch, we could go on, English, obviously, were languages that were used to try to displace literacy from Afro-descendant folks around the world. And what has happened miraculously is that those same languages that were used to displace the experience of connecting via language are now being remade and used by descendants of the African diaspora to remake the possibilities of those languages. I think Yen does that. I think Hughes does that. I hope that I'm doing that. I think about that with the same poems. So, I think the distance from a kind of, my other mentor, Mary Jo Bang, would always say humans are to language like fish are to water. Like we just swim in it without even knowing. And I think that distance from the kind of assumptions of the structures of English, and that other languages have different tenses, different ways to talk about the past, or with different ways to express doubt or to express intimacy. All of that helps me see the possibilities to kind of how do I recreate that in English too. So not recreate it, but make space to play with that in English too.
Well, one more time for Aaron and Vasvi.
Thank you.